All right, everybody. Thank you for watching. I have my lovely assistant volunteer, aka my sister here. And I was talking to her today. You know, I've done a lot of work on my family, and done quite a bit of work with my sister as well. And I was talking to her today, and she agreed to volunteer and do a couple extra sessions, because what I want to show people is really getting to the root cause of people who are what I call very intuitive. Well, how would you describe yourself? Intuitive? You got radar, right? It's like my my favorite story is the Pictionary story, because in other words, my sister's very highly in tune, sensitive, and while that is a bit of a superpower, it can make you at the same time a little vulnerable to what goes on in your environment. Does that make sense?
Right.
Like, you know, one example I give is years ago when we played Pictionary. Remember that in Aspen? And so if you ever play Pictionary, you want my sister on your team, not the other team, okay?
That's right.
I'll give you an example why. I remember that your partner drew out 6 tiny little squares on the paper. 1 square, 2 squares, 3 square, and tiny little ones, 1, 2, 3. And your first guess was correct, and you instantly said mosaic, of course. Like, that's obviously mosaic.
Obviously.
That freaked you out a little bit, but the second thing he wrote, squiggly line up and squiggly line down, and you guessed it instantly, extinct, of course. And you freaked yourself out. You're like, oh my God, I can't believe I did that. So everyone has intuition. For some people, it's turned up to like volume 11, okay? And where that can be a superpower, the volume is turned up a little bit too much on terms of what's going on in your environment, how other people are doing, right? If like I have bad things going down in my life, you'll call me and I'll have to lie to you. I'll be like, no, everything's fine. Quit calling me, right?
You're lying to me.
I'm lying to you the whole time. So what we want to do though is just because you're very intuitive doesn't mean you have to go through life always getting wounded, right? And having to like guard yourself. Your intuition can be a good offensive weapon. Okay. And I believe we can go in and kind of rewire what your nervous system believes is safe or not safe, right? Because one thing I find with a lot of people is the emotion code and body code work incredibly well. But what happens sometimes, people keep on needing to be reset. Does that make sense? You're like, oh, I blew a fuse, I need another session. It's like, and that's cool. We can do that for you. But how much better if we could go, okay, how about we figure out why something keeps setting you off? Does that make sense? What is it that your nervous system doesn't believe is safe? Okay, and that's what we're going to talk a lot about. Because I've been doing a lot of work with people who, they're people who, for example, if you're measuring their nervous system, at the beginning of a session, it'll be like at 20% of optimal, 30% of optimal, all sorts of different things are totally out of whack. At the end of the session, they're like, okay, I'm good again. And you do a session for the next week and you remeasure those areas and they're like, okay, it's bad again, right? And it's like nervous system, spirit to body connection, sometimes brain connectivity issues, different things like that. They go in, they go out, they go in, they go out. And while that's good for business, because they keep on having to come back and get fixed, what I prefer to do is we figure out and train all you practitioners who may be watching this too, how to get to the root of it so that things stay in, okay? And I'm working with a couple of people. I've really seen a lot of success with that lately. Working with one of my clients who was coming off benzodiazepines, Klonopin specifically, nervous system, you know, it's like, and they're like barely able to hold on because their nervous system's freaked out. And we do a session and they're like, okay, they're better. And the next day they're like, okay, I was better for a while, but I'm totally back to where I was. And I had one client, we do that over and over. And finally we're seeing things stick. Like in the last session, I'm like, okay, awesome. Another young woman I'm dealing with who has a lot of stress in her families, the dynamics with her parents, a lot of health issues, and her nervous system will be in and out and in and out. And we're making progress, but finally, in the last few sessions, we've dialed down to a little more tracking down on what is it that you do not think is safe, okay? And I'd like to say thank you very much to Dr. Cheryl Townsley for really having a lot of these conversations with me and explaining the importance of you feeling safe. Because when you don't feel safe, it's like boom. And to give you a little bit of example of this, you know, your nervous system does certain parts of it do an excellent job of keeping you safe, okay? If you all of a sudden look down on the floor and there's a huge snake there, you jump, you get out of the way. You don't think about it, right? You don't write out pros and cons of moving, right? You do it immediately.
Right.
And that's because you have certain aspects of your nervous system that are designed to keep you safe, and they will force you to take certain action. What can happen though, you know, as we go through life, sometimes your nervous system doesn't do very good threat differentiation, shall we say, okay? Your nervous system may relate your mother-in-law visiting to werewolves chasing you, right? It's all the same according to your nervous system, right?
Right.
That's why, you know, I heard someone say that the fear of other people's opinions is the modern saber-toothed tiger. What does that mean? Like what we think of other people think of us, how they treat us, how they accept us and honor us, can be very much attached to our identity and our value. And when we feel that's threatened, it's like goes nuclear for us. So what we're going to do is we're going to work with my sister, and you know, I've done quite a few sessions, but we're going to do a little bit differently, and we're going to work a bit on how to help you become more emotionally resilient. Does that make sense? So you're like bulletproof, more in general, right? So we are going to screen share this here, and Diana, so we're going to start a new document for you.
Okay.
You should be 58 years young, correct?
Yes.
I should know my sister's age, but it's not one of my strengths.
No, you got it.
So first thing we're going to pay real quick. God, I just ask you for wisdom and insight to be a blessing to my sister Diana and to manifest more of your peace and joy in our life in Jesus' name. So one thing we're going to do first is we're going to take measurements of a certain few areas, and that we'll, you know, as we do multiple sessions on this, we'll come back and remeasure them over and over. So this will be part one in a series where you get to explore with us how to take someone and rewire them for feeling safe, so that they can be more stable in the world and less vulnerable to stuff going on. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So I want to know how well your immune system is working, how well your nervous system is working, how well your brain is connecting to the rest of your body. So that's not talking about how well your brain is working, but connection issues. How well your heart as an energetic organ is working. I want to know how full your stress bucket is. I want to know how is your spirit to body connection. How's that doing? I want to know, as we're going through this, do we need to figure out, well, here's one potential thing that you can work on sometimes is occasionally, especially if people have a lot of autoimmune, really wacky health disorders, sometimes you need to figure out, is there something that you, a truth that you need to connect to, spirit, soul, body, and a lie you need to disconnect from spirit, soul, and body. And occasionally with this, you know, there'll be something that one aspect of your being doesn't believe or does believe that it shouldn't believe, that's causing major issues in your physiology and your health. And typically, if you track that down, what you'll find is you'll plug it in and fix it, and it'll come unplugged. And you have to kind of keep doing it a certain number of times till it sticks. Does that make sense? That type of thing would be especially common with people who kind of have wacky health issues. Does that make sense? They're like, life is good. Everything's, I don't know why, but my body's freaking out over everything, right? What's going on? Your body is responding to things that you aren't mentally and emotionally responding to, but your physical body has totally different game plan, okay? So is there something that we need to feel safe about that we don't? Or do we kind of need an affirmation, life affirmation to connect to? Or maybe there's a primary imbalance we need to work on first, all right? So I always like to say to people, I'm not super attached to being 100% accurate. If I was 100% accurate all the time, it would be weird, right? Instead of doing this, I would muscle test the winning Powerball numbers, right? And that doesn't work that way. But my suggestion is the more you let go of your ego when doing this, the more accurate you can be. Especially, I sometimes find the real gems when working with clients sometimes can be down these super weird rabbit trails where I'm like, I am making some super weird stuff up. But you get to the end, you're like, aha, that makes sense now. And it can be very, very helpful. So does that make sense? So Diana, do you give me permission to do this for you?
Yes, I give you permission to test proxy for me.
Awesome. So I'm gonna make the statement, I'm testing proxy for my sister Diana, and all of this will be her results. So I'm gonna say, as Diana, my immune system is functioning at 10% or more, 40 or more, 50 or more. I would say about 75%. And by the way I do muscle testing is I make a small physical effort, and I check to see, is there restriction in my breathing? If it's free, I know it's a accurate statement. If I feel a little restriction, I know that's false, and this allows me to test very, very quickly and pretty accurately. So, but there's many different ways to muscle test. That just happens to be what's working best for me. I used to do a muscle testing stick, which is a great way to learn, and I was pretty accurate with it, but I caused quite a bit of issues with my shoulders as a result. So I'm gonna say, as Diana, my nervous system is functioning at 10% or more. So I would say about 45% there. Brain functionality at 10% or more. You know, I would say about 45%. And you know, the interesting thing is that you know, I did this testing for you earlier today, right? And I tested you, and your brain had some connectivity issues. You went and got a chiropractic adjustment and it seemed to come back, right? But now we see it's back out, right? So that's one thing we want to go, okay, what the heck's the deal? Why would the signaling from your brain be low, you get an adjustment, it comes in, and then it goes back out very quickly, all right? So that's kind of one of the things you want to go, hey, what's the root of this? Because you don't want to have to go to the chiropractor like twice a week for the rest of your life. That's kind of bogus. Does that make sense? So I'm going to say, as Diana, my heart. So when we say heart, we're not talking about pumping blood. We're talking about emotional issues. As Diana, my heart is functioning at 10% or more. I would say about 85%. My sister's always super proud of high heart functionality. Good job. She's like, ooh, test my heart. See, I want like a good score. And so it's always nice to feel like you're winning, right? So the stress bucket is for Diana is 10% or more. So I would say about 30%. And one thing to keep in mind, sometimes people can have a fairly low stress bucket number, but they would say, wow, I wouldn't surprise that. I think it's totally full. It's not just a matter of how full your stress bucket is, but sometimes in my experience, it seems to be how well you handle stress as well. Does that make sense? Some people may have very full stress buckets, but they're handling it well. Other people not handling stress too well, so when it gets anything in there, it starts causing some issues, if that makes sense. So spirit to body connection is at 10% or more. All right, let's say at about 70%. That was similar to what we did earlier this morning, wasn't it?
Yeah.
All right. Now, spirit to body connection is a pretty important thing for those who don't know about it. You are a spirit, you have a soul, which is your mind, your will, your intellect, and emotions, which are connected. They can be divided for means of study and understanding, but never separated, okay? And currently, so you are a spirit, you have a soul, and you currently live in a physical body, right? So one way to explain this is sometimes if a glove is your body and your hand reaches into and is your spirit and it gives life and animates that glove, sometimes high amounts of physical and emotional trauma can start disconnecting your spirit from your physical body. And if it gets extreme, that can be a big problem. And you had mentioned a little earlier, Diana, we were having this conversation, and you mentioned that there was a period of life where it was kind of a tough period of your life, right?
Yeah.
And you said, I look back and remember that, and it's like I had all these experiences of feeling like I was looking down on my physical body, totally disconnected from it. And so when people have a very low, say 20%, 30% physical to spirit connection, often what I'll ask those people is like, hey, I bet everything in life seems hard for you to do. And they're like, yeah, everything seems super difficult. So I'm going to say all right, let's see here. So let's say this. As Diana, the most helpful thing to work on is here's what we're actually going to do first. We're going to just say safe in general. Is it safe to be safe, right? Some people are like, no, it's not safe to be safe at all, right? And the way we're going to measure that is we're going to go real quickly here to a document called the Map of Consciousness, okay? And the Map of Consciousness, if you've never seen this before, it measures different levels of consciousness, quantifies them. The bottom half of the map is in force, the top is in power. In force, you push on things, they push back. Your identity and your values dependent on your personal performance, how people treat you, how institutions honor you. There's a lot of stress, very little, stability in that. Or you can become very connected to God's unconditional love for you, which makes you really bulletproof in life. It means you can go for it in life. You can live a wholehearted life. You will fail, it will hurt, but never will that failure experience expose you to guilt and shame and separation. But one thing we're going to do, I'm going to say, as Diana, my level of consciousness on an emotional level on safe, like is life safe, includes 20. So here's probably a great way to start doing this, because when we measure this, just connection to safe in general, it's pretty low. I would say LOC of about 50, okay? And I've had this for other people. I had one young woman I did this for, she was less than 20. It was like, and it wasn't a lot of things to fix it, but it was just nothing seemed safe. And she was really stressed out about things that she maybe should not be stressed out about. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So this is a very important thing to work on, just totally connecting, just the concept, safe. Like, feels good. We can connect to it. We don't have to worry about things. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Any questions so far, Diana?
Why did you skip spirit, body, connect, disconnect?
Because what I want to work on is specifically this aspect of
safe.
Of safe, of right. What is it about your life or environment that you're doing great, and then something will happen, you'll be like, boom, like having major emotion, like your emotions giving you problems again, and then we see your nervous system kind of going haywire, like it's good, it's bad, it's good, it's bad, right? And so that's typically connected to safe. So in a general way, we said, okay, how well are you connected emotionally to safe overall? And it's very low. Does that make sense?
Too bad. Okay.
So we're gonna, and one thing, even if I always like to tell people, even if there's a low score, it doesn't mean that someone's fundamentally broken. It could be a couple of very simple things to move you up, right? So I know you don't like low scores, but it's not a big deal. So the way I'm going to phrase this, I'm going to say, as Diana, preventing me from most easily and most effectively connecting to safe is a So I'm going to go through trapped emotion. No. Heart wall. No. Spiritual root. When I say spiritual root, I'm talking about vow, judgment, offense, and unforgiveness. The most spiritual thing you can do is exercise your will in a certain direction. And when you exercise it and decide things that are crosswise of God's kingdom, you have an issue, right? If someone were to say, I am worthless, and God says, you're worth everything, well, there's disagreement. God's not going to change his mind. It's you need to change and come back in alignment. Does that make sense? So what I'm going to say, though, is that this issue is actually an issue on the body code. And we need to open up the body code. And I should have done that earlier. Sometimes it takes a bit to load. So we're going to say this issue is on the left of the body code. No, on the right. Yes, under. So we go on the right under misalignments here. And under skeletal, axial, thoracic cage. So one of the things to understand is that this often I'm finding there's a lot of energetic representations when we're talking about a skeletal system. You know, if you remember, Diana, we had previously done some work on, remember we were talking about your neck. Your neck would always go out all the time. Does that make sense? You're like, and it would seem like stresses in life, you go, and you'd be like, ah! You're like, can't do this, gotta go to the chiropractor, right? And it would, it was kind of owning your life a bit. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And
we said, okay, what do we have to do to fix the neck issue? And when we did that, it was very interesting because it was the first time that this had happened to me. The first issue that came up was upper limbs. Like I'm just going through this, upper limbs, ulna bone, the right ulna bone. And I'm like, what is going on? This is not making sense what your right ulna bone would have to do with your neck. But it seemed accurate, so I just kind of was open to what does this mean? And all of a sudden I got the light bulb went off, ding. It was an energetic representation of, right? If I'm on the defensive because I'm afraid that somebody's going to get me, this is my right ulna bone, right? And so what we had to do is we had to kind of work with you on changing your mindset of that you're not weak and you need to be protective, but you need to go into more butt-kicking mode. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. And it worked, right? It's like you start lifting weights and getting strong and changing your attitude. And as far as I know, it's improved a lot, right?
Yes. I started going to strength training 2 years ago in February. I'm 75% stronger. And
awesome.
I don't consider making plans based around whether my neck is going to feel good or bad.
Yeah, awesome.
Great.
So, so we're going to go the sternum. So different go over this a bit with you. The xiphoid process is often connected to like shock, because that's if you get sucker punched, that's where you get shocked. Okay. The sternum often has to do with pride and like confidence, right? If you notice, like if someone has a physiology where they kind of go like this, you know what they're doing, they're almost hiding their sternum. But if you grab your sternum and pull it up and out, now more confident pose. Does that make sense? I'm strong, I'm taking up space. Does that make sense? Yeah. The manubrium is often, if you go, it's my fault. Well, you're touching your manubrium there. And ribs energetically often seem to be connected to relationship issues for some reason. That's just my experience of noticing patterns doing this work with a lot of people. So, but we're going to talk about the connected to safe. The first issue has something to do with the sternum, okay? And I'm going to say, as Diana, the sternum is accurately described currently in this area on the map of consciousness. No, we'll say it's on the chart of emotions. And we'll go in here and we'll take a look at the chart of emotions. In column B, B6 of worthless. Worthless what? I would say more like my, not that you're worthless, but more like your resilience is worthless. Does that make sense?
Yes, I would like to be more resilient.
Yeah. Like you love yourself in general, but the area that you're like, oh, I'm kind of disappointed is the area of how bulletproof you are, right?
Not very.
All right, so we're gonna say that's what we're gonna work on, right? In that area, there's a lot of areas that you're very strong and very confident in terms of feeling safe, not so much. Does that make sense? So we're gonna say connected to this is a one or more issue. So we'll say there's two different issues regarding this, and we'll say the first one is a trapped emotion, no. A heart wall, yes. We'll call it an inherited heart wall, so an inherited energetic predisposition for something. And we'll say it's in B6 of shame. You know, shame is the lowest level on the map of consciousness, and it's the thing that people will do the most to avoid, right? Energetic, emotion, nervous system, whatever. We can't deal with shame, right? So an inherited heart wall of shame in, let's see, we'll say from dad's side, just dad. So we'll take a magnet here. That's what I got on the end of here, a bunch of magnets, and just release that for you. 2, 3, 4, 7, 8, 9, and 10. So take a nice deep breath in. All right. So we'll say the second thing connected to this is a, so another inherited heart wall, and so it's always sometimes super convenient to blame most of your issues on your parents, right?
Why not?
Why not? It's not our fault. I'm joking, of course, but sometimes you get an aha moment. You're like, oh, now that makes sense, right? I remember one guy, it was, he had an inherited heart wall of, or either heart wall or trapped emotion of conflict from dads. I'm like, whoa. I go, like, these are the guys who start like the barroom fights. He goes, they are all soldiers, all of them.
Wow.
I'm like, well, okay, they like a little bit of conflict, huh?
Wow.
Give me a gun and send me into war. So, so in B, also of shame, inherited heart wall of shame from 4 dads. 12 dads. All right, so on dad's side, back 13 generations. So I tend to find that, you know, the more further back it goes, it's kind of like a snowball rolling down the hill. Does that make sense? Getting bigger. So we can release that? Yes, we can. So we're going to do that for you real quick. By the way, one thing I will also remember that we need to add in here is your vagus nerve. Is it in or out? So I'm going to say, as Diana, my vagus is in, out, out. So we'll need to make sure we reset that for you, because that's your kind of your main nerve running through your body. You know, if it goes out, it really jacks with your nervous system big time, which may be one reason why, you know, it's low. But we'll check on that. But that's one thing you want to find out is, like, you know, you can't be like having to reset someone's vagus nerve every single time you get together. It's like, that's kind of a big deal. It should not be going out all the time. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So, so we actually have maybe 3. Sometimes you think you have 2 issues and you go, can we release it? No, there's another issue. It's kind of they sneaky and they crop up. So the 3rd issue regarding the sternum, you know, feeling that your resilience is worthless is a, actually going to go to the body code for this, and we'll say it's on the, we'll go to misalignments, skeletal misalignments, axial to the skull. We'll go to occipital bone. I tend to find energetically of the occipital bone has to do with vulnerability. You know, if you think of, take the biggest, meanest, baddest dude ever, right? But if I take a baseball bat and I sneak up behind him and I hit him in the occipital bone, it's going down. Does that make sense? It just doesn't matter. You get hit there, you're very vulnerable. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. And so often this has to do with the vulnerability of not feeling safe. This is one reason why eyesight-wise, if you lose your peripheral vision, or if you don't see well in your peripheral vision, it can really jack with your nervous system because your brain's saying, not safe, not safe, not safe. Someone could be sneaking up on us, right? That's why eyesight, what type of glasses you wear, can really, really mess with your nervous system. I did a video interview a while back with Cheryl Townsley on that. Like people who have, you know, they get these adjust eyes glasses that one eye will see far and one near. Whew. It may be technically convenient, but it messes with your nervous system, and all of a sudden your brain is like, something's wrong, something's wrong, something's wrong, because your eyes are taking in the information, right? And trying to decide this is threat detection, right? And if you're not, and if there's a problem with the threat detection, you know, there's alarms going off all the time. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So as down in my occipital bone is currently described on the, we'll say it's described on the chart of emotions. And so we'll go under energies, chart of emotions, and B6 of shame. So we'll call it shame here as well. And we'll say we have a one underlying thing connected to this, and it's a another body code issue on the right under misalignments, under systems. We'll go to nervous system, peripheral nervous system, autonomic nervous system, enteric nervous system. So enteric nervous system, you know, here's what I would describe it as, you know, if you've ever heard of a gut feeling, right? Your enteric brain is in your gut. You've actually got like 8 times more nerve signaling going from your gut to your brain as from your brain to your gut. Like the amount of nerve signaling in your gut is equivalent to the brain of a small dog. A lot of stuff going on there. And it's often kind of where you get intuition bubbling up. Does that make sense? So when your enteric nervous system is messed up, it's like kind of like your radar early warning system having problems. Does that make sense? Especially if you're an intuitive and you really rely on that. If that goes out, boom, high levels of stress. Does that make sense? Because your main way of keeping yourself safe is not working as well as you think it should. Does that make sense? All right. I'm going to say, as Diana, my enteric nervous system is having one main issue. It's a also body code issue. So sometimes there's layers upon layers, if that makes sense. On the under nutrition and lifestyle. So here's an interesting thing. It comes up dehydration, but lately this has been kind of flexible in terms of what this really means. We're not talking about dehydration of water. We're talking about a severe lack of something. Sometimes what you need is a, well, let's see what it is. So a severe lack of something on the map. We'll say it's described on the map in yellow. Severe lack of empowerment. So in this type of situation, sometimes what you need to do is you need to consciously focus your thinking and your on certain things. Okay. For example, one of the best things you can do for your nervous system and your emotions is to journal, and to journal out to train your brain to look for certain things, like what's going on in life that's good. What have I done well lately? And you need to write it out by hand because it integrates with your brain. And what happens, you've got things called mirror neurons in your brain, okay? And mirror neurons mean when you write something out, your brain thinks it happened again. Does that make sense?
Cool.
So one of the things I would suggest to you is that you spend time consciously journaling the areas and ways that you are actually empowered. Does that make sense? Things that you've overcome, things that you've totally handled, areas you've kicked butt. Does that make sense? Yeah. And what it does is that then your brain starts getting much better at looking for evidence in your environment that you actually kick butt instead of getting your butt kicked. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. And over a period of time, your brain knows 50 different ways that you kick butt, and it's not concerned anymore about what might come along. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
All right. So, but for this, let's just say this right now. Say, I am very grateful.
I am very grateful.
And appreciative.
And appreciative.
Of the many ways.
Of the many ways.
I have kicked butt in life.
I have kicked butt in life.
Of the many huge obstacles that I've overcome successfully.
Of the many huge obstacles I have overcome successfully.
I've overcome many things.
I have overcome many things.
That would have taken other people totally out.
It would have taken other people totally out.
And I choose to own my personal power.
And I choose to own my personal power.
Right. Empowerment is the process of courage, moving forward courageously. And one thing that's very important to understand is that there's certain parts of your nervous system that are designed to keep you safe. And they will always tell you that you shouldn't move forward and can't handle something because they just don't want you to change ever. All right. So part of moving forward in empowerment is to realize that there will always be that background signal saying not safe, you can't handle it, not safe. And sometimes you just need to go, oh, yeah, that's the part of my brain that thinks there's actually werewolves hiding in the bushes. And you just kind of go, thank you very much. We're not going to die. If I need you, I'll let you know. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. But some people, they think all those emotions, those feelings are accurate, which produces more stress, and then you pull back. Does that make sense? When you shouldn't be, you should be like, whatever, shut up, I can do it. So maybe have one more thing connected to the enteric nervous system. Back to the body code. We'll say it's on the left under energies. We'll go to an addictive heart energy. You can have an addictive heart energy to anything, to crack cocaine, to blame, to chocolate, to whatever. Does that make sense? All right. So in the notes, I'll just say AHE. And I have an addictive heart energy, something on the, so something described on the chart. Let's see what comes up. Not an A. B4 of panic. An addictive heart energy to panic. Panic is the emotion of we have to fix this soon because there's like a time deadline coming. Does that make sense? It's one of the reasons it can be very damaging is because when people panic, they tend to go, and you don't go, right? So it's an emotion you tend to carry around longer than other emotions. Similar with shock. Shock, you go, but you don't go, right? And so this, so we're just going to release it. So this is an energetic wiring and addiction to feeling or grabbing a hold of panic or reacting in a panicked way. Does that make sense? Like, oh no, we have to fix this quick, right? Instead of it can wait. Does that make sense? All right. Just going to reset that for you real quick. All right. And I'm actually going to use a sparker to reset your enteric nervous system. And I find sometimes doing the sparking that you would do if you're resetting your vagus seems to be effective. And what I'm going to do for that is I'm actually going to spark to the left of my belly button, middle belly button to the right, and I'm going to just keep doing that here while I close the circuit with my other hand, first behind my left ear, then behind my right ear, and I'm just going to come up over the top of my head. And while we're doing that, I'm also going to, that seemed to reset your enteric nervous system. Also going to make it my intention, Diana, for you also to reset your vagus really quick if we can do that. So that did also seem to reset your vagus. And I had checked when I did around the first time, I'm like, did that reset the vagus? No. Can we reset the vagus? Yes. And then that's why I did it the second time. And it did seem to reset that vagus that time.
Great.
So I would say your enteric nervous system is in. And we're just going to reset your, so just say this with me. Say, I'm grateful.
I'm grateful.
That God loves me.
That God loves me.
That I can rest in that love.
That I can rest in that love.
And that love pushes out any shame in my life.
That love pushes out any shame in my life.
All right. So that seemed to work. And so let's see how we're doing here. I'm going to go back and I'm going to measure this level of consciousness. I'm going to say, as Diana, my level of consciousness regarding connecting to being safe includes 75. So 50 to 175. Now, you know, I would say for most people, you might not shift that quickly, but you know, with my sister, we've done a lot of work together, and we've played around with this map of consciousness, getting your emotions pretty high on the map of consciousness in other areas. And what I tend to find is if you've done that in one area, it seems to kind of create a kind of a good foundation that you have built a structure on. And if we come over and want to build a new structure, we've already had a foundation, if that makes sense. So we'd already has a decent foundation, even though you measured pretty low in terms of being safe. But when we went to go build the structure, it went up pretty quickly. Does that make sense? So, so that pushes us to 175. What we ideally want to do is we want to be consistently at least 500. And so what we're going to do is we're going to do more sessions in the future. We're going to make sure we eventually get up to 500. The reason for 500, it's the level of love, and it's also where things go from hope to actual faith. So it's where you're much more dynamically creating what you want to in life. And when we get there, we're also going to train you on how to do certain affirmations that you can do yourself in the morning. Then when we've gotten rid of most of the roadblocks to getting to 500, even if you wake up in the morning and you're 175, you can spend 60 seconds doing an affirmation and it will shift things immediately for you.
Wonderful.
You have any questions on what we did today?
The sparker, I think I felt something shift.
Yeah, it's very interesting. The first time I did that for someone, I was like, I wonder if, you know, I experiment on anything. I'm like, I don't know if you can reset someone's vagus by proxy. I'm like, let's try it. And I did this to this woman. She's like, ooh, I felt that. I'm like, okay, cool. We'll keep doing that. So anyways.
Do you think people watching this understand the magnet clearance thing?
Yeah, most of these you're probably pretty familiar with the motion code or something. And I'm happy to restate that. You know, what you're doing is when you using your magnet down your central meridian is kind of like hitting the delete button on your computer if you have a virus, right? Now, simply hitting the delete button on your computer does not get rid of a virus on your computer unless you have pulled up the correct folder, subfolder, file, pulled it up, highlighted it, and then when you hit delete, your computer's like, oh, you want to delete this file? And you're like, yes, I do. And so what we're doing is energetically, we're bringing up certain files and issues, and when they're exposed, a magnet is just a magnifier of intention. I have enough intention that if I'm missing my magnet, I can just go like this, right? Other people may not be able to do that because they don't have enough belief or intention that that's what they're doing. But the magnet magnifies that energy, if that makes sense. So before we end this, let's do this because I'm curious on your nervous system. So we did reset the vagus. I want to know this right here. I'm going to say, as Diana, my nervous system is functioning at 50 more. So that shifts it up to 80%. And it will be curious to see, does that stay in? Because your chiropractic adjustment shifted it pretty quickly, but that was a couple hours ago, and now it was back before we did this session. So we want to know, hey, not only do we get the nervous system stay there, back up, but we want to make sure we create an environment where it's much more stable. Yeah. Let's check on this as well. I'm going to say, as Diana, my brain connectivity is at I would say at about 70%. So anyways, that's it. So check back with us. You know, again, I'm going to be doing multiple series of these with my sister, so you can see how we work through these issues and make sure that people are more stable, their nervous system, that we figure out what keeps unplugging them from life feeling safe.
That'd be awesome.
So, I may work myself out of a job, but that's okay.
That's okay.
That's okay. All right. I appreciate you so much letting me do this for you.
Thank you. It's my pleasure.
And say hi to all the wonderful people out there.
I will, and all your wonderful people.
All right.
Thank you, Stephen.
You're very welcome.